Hello and welcome to the 30th Scouching report for the 2020 NHL Draft. Today we're going to be looking at Martin Chromiak, a player who came from the Slovakian Pro League midway through the season to play for the Kingston Frontenacs of the Ontario Hockey League. And boy did he hit the ground running, and boy did a whole lot of people latch onto this player immediately. Chromiak is a player who caught my attention playing at the under-18s for the Slovakian national team last year. And I was certainly very interested to not only see him left off the World Junior team this year, but also immediately make the jump to play in the OHL, where he was immediately put on a line with potential future NHL superstar Shane Wright. So obviously I had to track this player and see what all the fuss was about. And I've tracked 3 games from his time in the Slovakian Pro League, as well as 4 games from his time in the Ontario Hockey League, so let's see what I found. First we go to the think category, and to me Martin Chromiak is more of a meat and potatoes play facilitator all over the ice. He has shortcomings in skill and mobility, but he does what he can to overcome it with his anticipation and intelligence away from the puck. He's reasonably responsible at both ends, but where he really stands out is making quick little passing plays to facilitate transitions for his line mates. And looking to the future, this is a player that I think is going to really need to rely on anticipation and his brain if he's going to become a capable National Hockey League role player. Anticipation and reaction are going to be paramount parts of his game rather than high-octane speed or skill to me. I did also come away with the idea that Chromiak is still very much a work in progress. He felt like he lacked a lot of explosivity and really fell behind on defensive cycles. And as we saw in the Daniel Guschin report that came out just before this one, I'm looking for wingers that are aggressive all over the ice and trying to apply pressure more often than someone like Chromiak does. To me, this is a player that left a lot to be desired in multiple areas of this category. And while in the last OHL game that I tracked, Chromiak completed 7 of 9 pass attempts, in his previous 3 OHL games I tracked, he only completed 30 of 45. And I found that a lot of that could be drawn back to just a plain lack of awareness of where his line mates were on the ice. And that was true from not only the early games when he came over from Slovakia, but that went through to the end of the season. Something as simple as keeping your stick on the ice or not keeping your stick in the face of your opponent seemed to be something that popped up for Chromiak from time to time. And when you're trying to stop a breakout and you swing your stick so wildly that you end up hitting, of all people, Quinton Byfield in the face, you know you might have done something wrong. So in the think category with Martin Chromiak, I can't help it but give him a 3B. This guy feels like a real work in progress in terms of a 200-foot, 60-minute effort player. He struck me as a really raw case of a facilitator of offensive transitions, and this is exemplified by his increase in controlled offensive zone transitions coming from Slovakia, where he put up 35 per 60 minutes, to Kingston, where he increased that number to 43. And since coming to Kingston, in his first 2 games he registered a controlled offensive zone transition percentage of 50%, but managed to improve that to 67% in the last 2 games that I tracked. As he is right now, he's a solid anticipator of play, and he can definitely cut off errant passes in open ice, but from here, the game is only going to get faster. And right now, I don't see the intensity off the puck or the speed and skill with the puck on his own stick to really find him super projectable. And for people out there who think he's an undervalued offensive winger that no one's really talking about, I'm sorry, but I don't think I see it. Next we go to the move category, and this is another one where I'm just, I don't know. There were far too many instances where I just didn't see enough speed generation of any kind out of Chromiak. Usually I will forgive a player for bobbling pucks here or there, as it's something that you see in the NHL constantly. But it felt like even getting pucks under control on his own stick was a bit of an issue for Chromiak. But I will say that as his season came to a close with Kingston, once he had time to get to the top speed that he has, which is pretty solid, I saw some nice aggression, especially off the boards with Chromiak. And that was something that in the early games of the season, especially when he was playing in Slovakia, that I simply did not see. When he's playing at his own pace, he has decent mobility to shake defenders off of his tail, and he can use it to push deep into the offensive zone, which is where his tools kind of really come to life. There were also flashes of being able to push through pressure in full stride, so if he can really learn to capture that straight line rush offense a little bit better and get to his top speed faster, he could be a more threatening player offensively. So in the move category, I'm giving Chromiak a 2D. It's not necessarily terrible here, but it's just another massive question mark of Chromiak that I saw throughout the entire season. There are signs of improvement, but I still really question how far it's going to take him, even when you consider how young he is. He isn't really much of a threat from a standing start in his first few steps. He has a solid top speed, but it takes a while to get there. I found him somewhat unreliable with the puck on his own stick, and at times I felt that he showed too much hesitancy really attacking the middle of the ice in the offensive zone with the puck on his own stick. And there were signs of resiliency and evasiveness under pressure, but far too often he could be removed from play and mitigated completely, so some more strength on his frame is also going to need to be a must. Next we go to the get category, and I am not one to just quote anecdotal visual evidence, but it's taken me months to think of and find a better example of probably the worst tracked performance I have had all season long. On November 15th, Martin Chromiak in the Slovakian Pro League played one of the top teams in that league, Banská Bystrica. He looked completely unengaged, had a shot attempt percentage of 21%, had a dangerous shot attempt percentage of 28%, and got benched for long stretches of that game. And while in the 3 games that I tracked in Slovakia, he had a 38% defensive controlled zone transition percentage, I really felt that if you ramped pace of play up on him and got him more involved in defensive transitions, he would get left behind constantly. And when he came over to Kingston, that defensive controlled zone transition percentage ballooned to 66.7%. And in 3 of the 4 OHL games that I tracked this season, that number was over 77%, with 2 of those games over 80%. So this is a player that just bleeds controlled defensive zone transitions constantly on smaller ice at a higher pace of play. Yes, he's a solid forechecker and a solid anticipator of play, but I came away more impressed with that area of the game while he played in the Slovakian Pro League rather than the OHL. It felt that there was just far too little urgency and pace to his game, especially away from the puck. And he just too often felt like he wasn't putting in the extra thought and extra work that's really required to be a reliable defensive player away from the puck, especially on defensive cycles. I found that he wasn't a physical threat whatsoever, but there were also times where I saw an effective remover of pucks from opponents. But on opposing rushes, I felt that his countermeasures on those rushes were really focused on straight line attacking, and he could get beaten far too easily without the agility to cover for himself and pivot effectively. And you might look at some of the data for Chromiak from a website like Pick224 and think that this is one of the better two-way players available in the draft. And while yes, Quinton Byfield is an exceptional hockey player with tons of speed and skill, defensive play like this is not going to win you any favors. And even when Chromiak tried to apply himself physically, there was nearly nothing there. He's going to need to be a lot more aggressive if he's ever going to be a physical shutdown player, which frankly, I don't really see in his future. And there's also going to need to be more strength on his frame to really push through pressure with the puck on his own stick. But away from it, this is a player that I felt was too ineffective far too often. So in the get category, I'm giving Chromiak a 3C. It wasn't necessarily terrible, and there were flashes of being a decent remover of pucks from his opponent, but this is another area where I just have no idea what he's going to become down the road. And frankly, I'm pessimistic unless a number of areas of the game can come quite a way. He has a hard time shutting down rushes in the OHL. He's not very much of a physical threat at all. He could take the foot off the gas pedal far too often, and at times could just not track pucks even as they dribbled through his feet into dangerous areas in the defensive zone. So I'm really not sure what kind of a player Martin Chromiak could be in the defensive sense unless there are some serious improvements in this category. But I suppose with the top speed that he showed once he got there is potential for him to be at least competent, but I'm not optimistic about that. Next we go to the pass category, and this is where the signs of hope are kind of there at the end of the tunnel for Chromiak. I found that he was a great facilitator of offensive transitions when he really didn't have to do much on his own stick. He uses little turns high up in the defensive zone to open up passing lanes and find line mates. He can make really quick reads and just move pucks into open space really creatively. And I found that when it came to passing the puck in transition, he was a quick thinker who who allowed pucks to just flow through him and enable his line mates to play with a higher speed and higher pace of play. When he gets deep into the offensive zone is when things kind of get even more interesting, as he's able to use his backhand and send pucks all over the ice from below the goal line effectively. And being able to play in the corners and below the goal line effectively with some offensive flair to it is something that NHL teams are always looking for, and I do see that in Chromiak from time to time. But he wasn't perfect. His quick thinking style could get him into trouble sending passes into no man's land, and there were instances where I felt that Chromiak was just more than happy to hand possession over to the other team. And these kinds of things even happened when he was under very little pressure, so some more time and experience and refinements are going to be necessary in order to project him positively in this category. So in the pass category, I'm giving him a 2B. I think this is a positive area of his game. He's enabling transitions very well and certainly allows higher octane line mates to play at those speeds. He's a quick thinker, but it can get him into trouble, but it didn't happen tremendously often. And I certainly wouldn't categorize him as an extraordinary playmaker, but he's certainly capable of trying to generate offense in areas of the ice you need to be able to generate offense. And ideally, I would like him just completing more of his passes on average, especially considering how few of his passes were dangerous. But I think with more experience on smaller ice and with line mates like Shane Wright, that number should improve over time. Finally, we look at the shoot category. And I'll say this about Martin Chromiak. He certainly has a quick and powerful wrist shot that he really likes to lean into quite a bit. But there's always a caveat with Martin Chromiak, it seems. 75% of his shot attempts came from low danger. That is far too much, especially for a player with a shot that is as good as Chromiak's. In terms of dangerous shot attempts off of his own stick across all the forwards I've tracked, he was bottom 10, but when you look at total shot attempts taken by a player, he rocketed himself to top 15. He is the #1 forward I have tracked this year in terms of generating low danger shot attempts off of his own stick by 14%. And in fact, of all of the skaters I've tracked this season, 5 of the 6 most low danger shot attempts per 60 coming off the player's stick are defensemen. The one of those 6 that's a forward is Martin Chromiak, and he was 4th. So in the shoot category, I'm giving Chromiak a 1D. This is a really tough one for me because I do think that the shooting talent is very solid. But again, going back to his lack of skill and a real explosive first couple of steps, I found it really difficult for Chromiak to dance his way into dangerous areas and generate dangerous shot attempts. But his shot is quick and powerful, and on the power play he could be a useful weapon, and away from the puck in the offensive zone he could be a very lethal cross-ice one-time option. So I think that there's hope if other areas of his game grow in terms of the floor of talent that I saw, if he can manage to get himself into dangerous areas a little bit more often, especially with the puck on his own stick, he could be a bit more of a dangerous goal scorer. But this is a guy who really strikes me as a very poor man's Alexander Holtz, and I have some real reservations about Alexander Holtz being a guy who can shoot from everywhere, and he's a guy whose shot is ridiculous. And I wouldn't categorize Chromiak's shot as ridiculous, but it's very good, so improving his shot selection should help him a little bit moving forward. And we'll start to get into my overall thoughts on Chromiak here. I do think that there is a role for a player like Chromiak in the National Hockey League. I think he could be a good trailing forward in a forecheck that's able to sneak behind opposing defenses in low danger areas, so if he can leverage that into navigating himself away from the puck and sneaking his way into medium danger areas, I think he could be a solid goal scorer. But as of right now, his shot selection certainly needs work, and he certainly likes to shoot the puck a lot. So the way we wrap up these reports is we look at the best part of a player's game, the good part of a player's game, and the not so good part of a player's game. The best part of Martin Chromiak's game to me is his passing vision all over the ice, especially in the offensive zone. When he gets deep into the offensive zone, especially when he has a full head of steam, he can be a pretty dangerous playmaker off the boards and below the goal line. And in transition, he's a smart surveyor able to slow the game down, spot streaking line mates up the ice, and get pucks to them effectively. The good part of his game is away from the puck. I do think that there's good anticipation skill that really tries to overcome the shortcomings that he has. He can track play well, getting himself into passing lanes and rush lanes so that he can intercept play, and he is a solid forechecker deep in the offensive zone, able to apply pressure when necessary. And he may not apply a tremendous amount of pressure often, but he's calm, he's careful, and at times he can be quite unpredictable for opponents. The not so good part is really just his overall projectability as a role player of any kind, to be frank. Especially as a useful play driver, I just find his potential to be questionable, especially as play continues to ramp up in pace. His intensity level fluctuates too greatly for my own taste, and is more often than not too low for the situation at hand. His agility, his puck control, and his rush defense are far from an ideal level, and while he's young and did show some signs of improvement while he played with Kingston, I think that there is a long and murky road ahead for Martin Chromiak to become a very specific type of NHL player. So overall, I'm giving Martin Chromiak an optimistic 2D, and I'll tell you why. I think Martin Chromiak could be a solid role player, but I don't see him as a great player. There could be potential for Martin Chromiak to be a player that you really don't think about too much in the defensive end, park high in the defensive zone, pair him with faster, more skilled, and defensively responsible line mates, and allow him to be the first pass receiver who can hit streaking line mates as they enter the neutral zone or enter the offensive zone. After that, he can trail behind the faster, skilled line mates as the third forward in the offensive zone, where he can use his playmaking and shooting talent to finish offensive plays. So as a tertiary scoring option off a rush that can facilitate offensive transitions, I could potentially see a role for him. But that is a very specific job, but I suspect that as pace ramps up and he faces more and more competition and his opponent gets more and more intelligence on how to counter him, I'm really questioning just how likely it is that he gets to that point. And when it comes to just a large number of statistical categories that I tracked, simply put, Martin Chromiak is just ineffective. Of 57 forwards that I've tracked as of the shooting of this video, in terms of passing attempts per 60 minutes, he sits 47th. In terms of completions per 60 minutes, he's 45th. In terms of dangerous passes per 60 minutes, he's 53rd. In terms of total zone transitions, both offensive and defensive, with control and without control, he's 41st. And in total offensive transitions, he does go up to 29th, but when you look at controlled offensive transitions, he drops back down to 38th. In terms of dangerous shot attempts per 60 minutes, he's 48th. And in terms of the share of shot attempts that were dangerous coming off of Martin Chromiak's stick, he sits 55th. So in my view, it felt like he just wasn't doing a whole lot far too often, both with Kingston and back in Slovakia. I found that Shane Wright was an absolute horse on that line, all over the ice. And I have all the time in the world to talk about Zaid Wisdom and the work that he puts in all over the ice every single shift, combined with the skill that he has. And with Chromiak playing a more of a facilitator's role around the ice, trailing those two in offensive rushes and being a scoring option in those situations, that's something that does seem like a highly symbiotic relationship between those three. But I think that you're really going to need to be wary of that if you're projecting Chromiak moving forward. His ability to make quick and creative passing decisions all over the ice, combined with his raw shooting talent, does provide some hope for his future. I think this is a player that could become an NHL player one day. But this is a really good example of a player where the public data doesn't really encapsulate the player's playing style or projectability into the future. And while there's potential for Chromiak to be a good finishing offensive forward that can chip in transitions, you need to be able to chip in all over the ice if you're going to enable those offensive situations to happen. And getting into those favorable offensive situations is something that I value a lot. And frankly, I found Martin Chromiak to be far too ineffective on his own to get himself into those offensive positions. And in the right scenario, I definitely think there's potential for him to be a role player, but this is a player that I've seen some outlets have ranked in the first round, most seem to have him in the second round, and while he sits in my third round, I think he's a really interesting cautionary tale about the public data that might be out there in prospect spheres. So that's it for this Scouching report. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so that you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You'll get access to an exclusive Discord server, credits at the end of every video, data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies, or you can pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and thanks for watching.